Welcome back to another episode of Rob Sports. And as you can see by the title, man, I'm going to be doing a recap on the Ruston versus Midland game. See, I ain't got my partner in crime, D. Jones, with me today, man. So technically, I wouldn't say that this necessarily episode of Third and Long. This is just me kind of just doing a individual game breakdown. That might be something I might kind of just start doing. It's just me kind of just freestyling it for this video right here. So obviously, as you see by the title, I'm covering the Ruston versus Midland. So as right now, man, this is pretty much the first half that I got. I took some notes down from the first half, some things that I saw Ruston in, some things they did good, some things they did okay, some things they might need to improve on moving forward. But man, honestly, I didn't expect domination to this point. I mean, I was looking at Midland's record. Obviously, you know, I was watching Coach Ball's show, and he was talking about how when you look at Midland's record, they're 1-3. So, you know, most people are going to assume that they're not a good football team just because they're 1-3. But Coach Ball was like, but if you look at it, they played top teams in Texas, you know, some top teams that's ranked in Texas. So he was like, man, even if you take 93% of high school football team in America and you put them up against the 3 games that they had to play, he was like, they easily go 0-3 as well. So, you know, so I wasn't really overlooking them and kind of just hearing Ball kind of just talk about some things they were doing good. I was like, okay, this might be a much closer game than we might think. But it's kind of really it's really just a repeat of what happened last year. And Ball even touched on that in his show too with Nick Brown, where he was just saying that he think that they were a good football team last year. It's just that Ruston jumped up on them so early that, you know, they kind of just never really was able to get back in control of the game. And I kind of feel like that's the same thing that went on in this game. Like, I mean, the first 2 plays defensively wise for him, man. Jaden Andy come out there, makes a tackle for a loss, read that pass beautifully, that played beautifully and was able to get downhill and be able to come make a tackle for the loss. And the very next play, man, he ended up coming up with a pick 6, and that was a beautiful pick 6. That was one of them pick 6 to where he just, you know, kind of read that thing perfectly and just went up there and took it. Now, it's crazy because looking at the pregame, right, getting ready for the game to actually come on, I'm looking at them coming on the field, right, and I'm seeing them. Well, I take that back. It wasn't pregame, my bad. But when they was taking the field for their first defensive possession, I'm just looking at the energy he got. I look at him go to a few guys, dap a few guys up, and I'm just seeing. I'm like, okay, I'm just peeping them out. Then very first play, tackle for a loss. I'm like, okay, you know, he coming out here really ready to play. Very next play, pick 6. I'm just like, oh my God, that was beautiful. You know, so that kind of put them in a good position. Like I said, one of the things that I kind of was looking at too with Ruston over the course of the season, you know, from the Acadiana game, from the Cabot game, and even from the Longview game, it was times that tackling wasn't just necessarily always there. You know, it would be times where a guy that you would get to a ball carrier, the first person they get to him don't normally bring him down. He's just, you know, running for a few extra yards. And a lot of times, like we know, football is a game of inches, right? So a lot of times those extra yards can be a deciding factor on if a drive is extended or if a drive is minimized. So they had a 3rd and 12 play. And you had the linebacker, you know, he kind of ready to look good. He ended up missing the play, just kind of probably took a bad angle on it and kind of found himself out of position, which allowed for them to be able to get that conversion. But they end up making a stand and they end up having to punt the ball off. Initially, I was like, good tackling on kick return, because we know that that's been something that the Bearcats have kind of struggled with this year, is their kick return coverage. Obviously, you see they end up giving up a kick return in the Cabot game, and then you see for the most part throughout this season so far, they have given up a lot of explosive runs on kick returns. So initially, I was looking like, okay, they were doing a good job at being able to get to the ball carrier and bringing them down. They had the one little hiccup. I think it might have been like two decent kick returns that they was able to return. So, you know, that's just something I just feel like, you know, they're going to have to kind of get a little better with. And it might just be angles, pursuit, and it might just be effort. And then you got to think about it. I think that once they end up giving up their long kick return, I know that sometimes you kind of can get a little complacent in your mind and kind of start taking a foot off the gas and thinking that a team is going to lay down. And sometimes some teams, you know, they don't necessarily lay down even when you jump up on them a little earlier. So that was one thing. Then it was a play that they had in the red zone that they ended up calling back, obviously, but it was a touchdown to Ahmad. They called back for an ineligible man downfield. Now, what stood out to me was on that play with Hartwell, right? Just seeing Hartwell roll out the pocket. Obviously, we've seen him do it over the course of the season, but to see him be able to make that throw off balance throw, and it was like you had Ahmad right here and you had a defender. So he was able to make an off-balance throw, and he was able to just zip that thing in there to Ahmad, and that was just a heck of a pass on Hartwell's part. So that was just something nice that stood out to me. Obviously, too, just his dual threat ability, being able to make things happen with his legs as well. But I mean, other than that, man, it pretty much was just an overall dominant performance so far from the Bearcats. Also, too, that was from the first quarter. So the second quarter, the only thing that kind of stood out to me, obviously, was the pass that they gave up. that explosive pass they gave up on the sideline. And that's kind of, what was going on last week against Longview. They gave up a couple explosive plays in the past game against Longview, and that was something I was just kind of hoping to see that they corrected. Now, I will give them credit for the most part. They stood tall in pass defense. Obviously, you got the Jay Nannick interception. Obviously, you got Rakeem Potts that's been, doing what he do up front, being able to get two sacks, being able to get some pressure on the quarterback. And for the most part, whenever they thrown the ball into the secondary has done a good job at being able to cover it. I think number 11 might have had a nice little pass breakup on. I don't know if it was 11 or 25. I couldn't really tell, but one of those guys had a pretty nice pass breakup. So for the most part, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Now the biggest thing is, because I'm touching in after the first half, so depending on how the second half go, I might not touch back in after the second half because, like I said, as of right now, man, this pretty much is a dominant performance on the Bearcat end. So the biggest thing for me now is just seeing, okay, are they going to be able to stay disciplined and are they going to be able to stay locked in? So, I seen Coach Saban. I was looking at an interview with Coach Saban, and he was talking about with Alabama. And I can't remember exactly what game it was. And he was going off. I think it was like a false start call. It was some crazy pre-snap penalty that they got in the game if they were blowing them out. And Nick Saban is jumping down the dude's throat. And everybody was kind of just like, why? And it's one of those things to where it's like, okay, I want to see can y'all stay disciplined over the course of a full game, because regardless of what the score is, for one, you don't play for the score. You just play for play after play. Don't worry about the score, right? So, but whenever you up, you don't take your foot off the gas. You don't start coasting. You don't start becoming less disciplined, because we've seen anything when it comes to football. We've seen 21-point deficits erased just like that. We've seen 28-point deficits erased just like that. So you never want to take your foot off the gas, and I think that that's the sign of a true championship team, is those teams that say, man, I don't give a darn who we going up against. We're going to prepare the same way, regardless if it's a top team, whether it's a bottom team, and I don't give a darn what the score is. We're going to play until there's zeros on the clock, So that's my biggest thing. Are they going to be able to stay disciplined offensively? Are they going to be able to minimize? And one of the other things, too, I think that which was kind of surprising this game is that they had 4 first half penalties, and that's something that I think they've been pretty good at over the course of this year. It's just minimizing penalties. And obviously, if you can minimize pre-snap penalties and post-snap penalties, for the most part, you will be one of the least penalized teams. So that's something that they have been good at avoiding. So that's just me kind of throwing it in just to see if they're going to be able to stay disciplined over the second half of this game, So like I said, depending on how it goes, if there's a couple young guys that get in that be able to make a few plays, and I can go, okay, I want to kind of see a little bit more of this kid right here, then I probably touch back bases with you guys. But like I say, if the performance stays all the way dominant all across the board, then who knows, man? I'll probably just end it at that. But we'll see. All right, man, so that wraps up the game. Ruston ended up pulling the game off 49-21, moving to 4-0. And, like I said, kind of looking at the first half, like Ruston jumped up on them real early. And I think that they kind of were just struggling to try to kind of get their feet back up under them. They came out to start the second half off with an onside kick that they ended up recovering. And right after they recovered that onside kick, they ended up driving the ball down the field and ended up scoring. So, the biggest thing that I was saying going into the second half for me was really just trying to see how focused were they going to be able to stay. And, honestly, the way that Midland was doing the onside kick, I wouldn't even necessarily say that was just a lack of focus. I just think the way that they were kicking it, they kind of were doing, it kind of had some little trickery going. So, it's easy to kind of fall for the smoke and mirrors and get caught off guard with what they were doing. And they end up getting one of those onside kicks. But I think that some of the things that kind of led to the lack of focus were, special teams. I think they had a situation where they were finna gear to try to kick a field goal on one possession. They ended up getting, I think, a pre-snap penalty, which moved them out of field goal range. Then they went to go punt the ball, and there wasn't even a punter on the field. The punter wasn't even on the field. They just hiked the ball into the backfield. Luckily, they ended up recovering it, but that was kind of just crazy to me, right there. And then, like I say, another thing too, man. Like I said, at the end of the day, you look at the game as a whole and you say, okay, well, the most important thing is they came out with a win. I will say that. But there's still areas of concern, and it's almost, I was just looking at Coach Boss post-game interview, and he was kind of just saying early on, he don't know if they played that good or if Midland was that bad. And that's the same thing I was kind of asking myself. So it's even when you look at a lot of Coach Ball interviews, I know they might kind of seem a little negative, and it's kind of he downplaying the team, but it's it's one of those things where you have to look and say, okay, we're not executing in aspects of the game, right? And the competition that we're playing outside of Longview hasn't really been able to exploit it. Like, for the most part, they played a pretty darn good game of, against Longview, other than, you know, a couple of defensive lapses, other than a fumble. But for the most part, they played a pretty good game. They were able to battle back. They were able to kind of fight the adversity. So that was the first real challenge. And you look at them, they came out aggressively, defensively wise. You know, like I said, the Jaden and pick six. Kind of, you know, set the tone for the day. But it's one of those things, like I say, like, even with the secondary, you know, they end up giving up a long touchdown pass for one, but then they also gave up another long touchdown, another long pass down the field that didn't result in a touchdown, but that pass ended up leading to a touchdown. And then it was a couple times, might have been two different plays where they ended up having a guy had a few steps on the defender, quarterback just overshot him. By the way, that quarterback got a phenomenal arm, man. He was out there putting that thing out there. You know what I mean? So those are the things that, you know, you have to kind of look at and say, well, we have to get better in this aspect, because what happens when we go up against a team who can exploit these lacks, you know, these areas, these gray areas that we kind of have. But for the most part, I mean, you know, I like the aggression that they came out with early on. I like how they, you know, they were able to kind of, you know, jump up on them early. But it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I just want to see them finish a little bit stronger. But, you know, it was some things to critique, obviously, but it was some things to like, you know, obviously, you know, for the most part, Ruston kind of had their way running the ball. I mean, it was almost one of them situations where it was like the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions game. You know, I seen Coach JB was talking about that game. He was just talking about how the Detroit Lions offensive line was able to take the Ravens defensive line and take them from here and put them to here. And he was just basically saying, if you can get pressure, if you can push the defensive line back to linebacker depth, you won't lose a game. And Ruston was able to kind of just do what they wanted to do in terms of running the ball. So, you know, like I say, man, it's interesting to see the little things that they're going to fix going into this week. I know there's going to be some things that Ball's probably going to get with the team about, and, you know, they're probably going to correct the things going forward. And I think that a lot of times with the covering in terms of things that's being allowed downfield is kind of just simply technique. You know, I think on the touchdown pass, I seen that they had gave up. You had a guy, you know, kind of opened up his hips early when the guy ran a slant. He faked outside and he opened his hips up and he just kind of went back. And at that point, he was out of position. So that's one of those things that's just kind of like, you know, tuning up the technique probably could have took away from possibly, even if you would have given it up, you still would have been in a position to be able to secure the tackle, opposed to kind of just, you know, diving in his legs and he just run down the field 60 some yards down the field. But, you know, I'm just curious to see how they're going to attack those things. They got Stephenville coming up. I hadn't had a chance to really look at Stephenville just yet, so I'm gonna kind of take a look at them and see exactly what it is they got. And I think I'm gonna kind of do like a little a game preview and just kind of looking at some things that, you know, Ruston probably can take advantage of going up against Stephenville offensively and defensively. But, man, if you guys did enjoy this video, do me a big favor, man. Smash that thumbs up button. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. And when you subscribe, make sure that you turn that post notification bell on and we be notified every time I upload. And I'll see y'all in the next video.